and then start working the next day, and it with jet lag, it doesn't get no fun. So anyway, we had a couple of weeks, and then I think we shot for 6 weeks. I hope I'm remembering that right. And we shot at Pinewood Studios in London, built most of the sets that you see, and then we also shot for a week in Liverpool, which was very important. And it was at the beginning of the shoot. So I think that was helpful to all of us because there's something very specific about the story being set partly in Liverpool. The fact that Peter is from there. It's a very specific city with its own identity and a very strong sense of identity. I mean, the Beatles are from Liverpool. That's not coincidental. Like Peter and there's a great new documentary about the making of Sgt. Pepper's, that album, and I watched it recently, and it really does give you a sense of where they came from and how that informed their music and the way that they experienced and handled their fame and everything. So anyway, I thought a lot about that with Peter, and we were able to shoot there. Liverpool's also used for exteriors of London now because it's easier to shoot there, and there are certain parts of it that haven't changed as much as London.
Over here.
What's up?
So the question was, what is the distribution plan for the movie?
The movie is coming out, it came out in LA and New York the end of December, and just recently, and then it'll be released around the country beginning mid-January. I don't know the exact date, I should know that. It's soon. Is it this week? Okay, it's this week.
I could be
Check your local listing.
back there.
What's your favorite film of Gloria Grant?
So the question was, what's your favorite film of Gloria
I
Grant?
love your voice, thank you. My favorite is In a Lonely Place, which is a great movie. Oh my God, it's such a good movie. She made it with Nicholas Ray, the director who she was married to at the time, although I think they were getting a divorce at the time. It's a movie with Humphrey Bogart. It takes place in Hollywood, and it's a movie about people who make movies. And it's incredibly well done. It's a very taut story, and she's so good. She's very economical, and it's got some great scenes, and a lot of people like that one the best. But she made a lot of good movies. That's certainly, I would say that's my favorite.
We have time for a couple more back here on the aisle.
What's the favorite film you've ever done?
So the question is, what's your favorite film you've ever done?
That's a hard question. It's sort of like saying, who's your favorite child? You probably don't know, and if you did, you would never tell anyone. But I certainly. Hello. Oh, there I am. When I met my husband, we were doing Bugsy, so that has a certain. And then, thank you. Anyway, each movie I sort of remember where I was in my life, and that has nothing to do with anybody else's experience of watching the films, but for me, it's like, I remember, oh yeah, that was when this happened. Events in your own personal life, as well as professional, so yeah, that's a really tough question. But one of them is that my parents really like Open Range, which is a Western that I made, so that kind of makes me happy because my parents watch it all the time. It's one of the movies that I made that could be on television. That my father isn't too offended by. So,
Have your parents seen this?
they have. They liked it very much. You know, they had a great time. They came to LA, and there was a screening, and we went out to dinner afterwards. My dad's 91, my mom was 88. They've been married 67 years.
Wow.
not bad, right? They're amazing people. They still live in San Diego where I grew up, and so they come up for stuff like that, and we had a really great time. They enjoyed it. We went out afterwards. They had a couple drinks.
All right, we have time for one more back here at the side.
Thank you very much for coming to Hot Springs and also for sharing your talents with the world. It's amazing. Comment on the part of the film when you are doing Romeo and Juliet. I don't think I've ever seen that before.
It was a comment about the part of the film where you're doing Romeo and Juliet and saying that she's never seen it done more beautifully.
Oh, thank you. So, yes, thank you very much. I know it's one of my favorite plays, of Shakespeare's plays. I got to do it twice, and so they wanted, that actually is not, that didn't really happen, sorry. I know. So they wanted to put that in the movie, and I was nervous about it. I thought, I was just concerned also, as Jamie reminded me recently, we had to shoot it, I think, on day 3 or 4 of the shoot. So I just, from a very practical standpoint, I was concerned about it because I mean, I knew where the movie had to go, and I knew where I had to go in terms of Gloria being ill, but I hadn't done almost anything that led up to that. So I needed to figure out how to get that right, and I knew that in fact it hadn't happened, so I had to somehow make it believable that she could go and do this and yet be as ill as she was. So that was, I was just more concerned about that. I also didn't want it to be sentimental, and I didn't want the movie to be sentimental. So those were my personal concerns. And Peter Turner, he's in that scene. The real Peter Turner is the guy that brings the chair out to sit in the chair. That's Peter. In fact, when this happened to Peter, when Gloria came back into his life, he in fact was back in Liverpool doing a play at the Liverpool Playhouse, which is where we shot that. And he was doing an Alan Bleasdale play, a very silly play, and so we shot more of that than we ended up using in the movie, with Peter coming in to do the show. You do see it, but only kind of briefly. So in that sequence, Peter played more role. There were more scenes with that character, but that part of the movie ended up falling away. So you ended up only seeing that. But having Peter there that day was amazing. And I loved doing it, and I also threw in another line at the end that Jamie didn't know I was gonna throw in, which actually comes from the balcony scene, not from that scene. The scene in the movie is the scene when they first meet at the dance. And so at the end of the scene, I threw in another line just to sort of surprise Jamie, which I'd forgotten that I did, and then he reminded me of that. He was like, "Annette, what are you doing?" But I couldn't resist. There was one lady right here who wanted to ask something. There you are.
I'd like to know if Peter knew before Gloria passed away the reason she broke up with him.
So the question was, did Peter know before Gloria passed away the reason she broke up
The
with
real
him?
reason.
The real reason.
You mean because of illness?
Yeah.
What a good question. I think he did know why they had broken up, but I think that, you know, it's interesting. Peter was completely accessible for making the movie. He's the loveliest man. When you meet and just talk to Peter, you completely understand why Gloria would fall in love with him. He's just this very decent person. He's a decent, loving, ethical person. And his family was as well. And he's very discreet. He tells the story of what happened, but you're left with more questions, really, than knowing exactly what happened with Gloria between them. And so I would ask Peter questions, and I did. And I asked him questions, and I would say, look, Peter, this is, this is personal, and if you don't want to tell me, I understand. And if you want to tell me certain things, and we can agree that I'll just never tell anybody. So we discussed a lot of things that really aren't in the book, but I did get the sense that when they had broken up, they had spoken some on the phone in between, but I did feel like it was always a bit unresolved for Peter. But it wasn't as though it was just that she wanted to break up and he didn't. I think there were times, I think it was messy. I think it went back and forth. And I think there are some things that Peter has never really told anybody about what happened, which I love and I respect that. So I think the answer is he did eventually find out, but at the time he didn't know. If that's what you're asking too?
Yeah.
Yeah, so at the time I don't think he knew. She hadn't told him she'd ever had breast cancer.
Oh, that was understood, I think.
Okay.
So, but I kept wanting him to know the reason she pushed him away.
I know. I know. I did too. I know, and there are certain things she did. I feel like, oh, Gloria, why did you do that? But then
Her love for him. It was out of her love for him.
I'm so glad.
You know,